this episode with Tiffany, Dr. Tiffany is outrageous. She really, I think, expressed so much of what we've been trying to say, right?
Mhm.
Around,
Yes.
all the neuro, issues that are going on, but really to bring it full circle is so many times you and I are talking about like how we can break these cycles with our children. But she
Yeah.
brought it back to the older generations. And I don't think we've had anybody bring that up before, right?
No, no, like our parents and our grandparents and,
And there's some healing that can be done there, right? But
yes.
we tend to sort of write it off like, yeah, we're not going to change what's going on with them. But she gave a really beautiful perspective on, she has this like three-prong approach to how we can do some of this healing, right?
Yeah. And specifically about how she did some with her own grandmother just on Mother's Day. So very recent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that listeners are going to want to go to her website, and she's got some free training there, a class, because she focuses it down. She takes these very complex issues around emotions and trauma and past relationships and how we show up. And she just, what is that when you
She
simmer
synthesizes.
it down? Yeah, she takes it down to steps that you can take and
Yeah.
show up differently in your family, with your parents, with your kids, with your friends, with everyone, and make a difference in your life, transform things in your life. Yeah.
True
Amazing.
inspiration. True
Yeah, she's
inspiration.
fantastic.
Yeah. You gotta love it.
The world is a lot right now. Are you feeling it? We all need new tools to help us walk through the chaos with grace, ease, and compassion for each other and for ourselves. In this podcast, you'll hear from parents, educators, and other experts who can bring perspective to the monumental job of parenting. It's time to level up and be warriors for our kids and our communities. This is the Warrior Parent Podcast. I'm Marci Mitchell.
And I'm Debbie DiManno. As parents, we understand that it really does take a village to raise our kids. We hope that this podcast serves to create and support that community for you. Join us as we discuss and practice our core tools, which are proven mind-body techniques that can be used by anyone to improve your life on a daily basis.
All right, welcome back to the Warrior Parent Podcast. We are, as always, grateful that you are joining us today. We have a wonderful guest. We will be speaking with Dr. Tiffany Brown-Bush, who is diversely trained as an integrative mental health therapist, and that's a new one for us, so we are grateful to have her. She's also a traditional neuropath and board-certified doctor of natural medicine. Dr. Tiffany, as she said we can call her, specializes in ADHD, brain health, anxiety, dysregulated nervous systems, and TBIs, and she'll tell a little bit more about some of these abbreviations you're going to hear, for individuals, young people, and their families. She personally struggled during her youth with mood, food, and focus issues, and she later came to realize that many of her triggers were rooted in genetics, childhood trauma, food sensitivities, antibiotic overuse, stealth infections, digestive challenges, and hormonal imbalances. So Dr. Tiffany is the creator of the Doc Bush-Brown protocols, and she has 23 years of experience in wellness coaching, fitness, and nutrition, and 14 years experience as a neuropsychotherapist specializing in ADHD. She has further experience in functional medicine and neuropathy. Is that how you say it?
Naturopathy, and it is a mouthful.
Okay.
Yes.
Naturopathy. I'm going to just keep rolling with this because I will not get through this introduction without messing it up. So let's just keep going. And the following areas of expertise: rational living therapy, which is a form of CBT, QNRT, which is a trauma reset, super interested in that, IFS, level 1 training, functional neurology and brain retraining and recoding for Alzheimer's, naturopathy, and advanced functional medicine treatment, exercise, supplementation, and lifestyle modification. So all the stuff, all the stuff.
Yay,
Welcome, Dr.
yay,
Tiffany.
yay, Marci.
Yes.
Yay, Marci. All right.
This is
I'm
why
glad.
Debbie takes the first question, because I have to recover from my intros usually.
Like some weird host hazing. I'm so sorry.
Wow.
Host
Wow.
hazing. I don't take it personally. It's good for me.
Okay.
Yes. Wow. 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 Okay. So I don't even know where to begin. Normally I'm like, I got something to pull up, like some connection or whatever, but I think I'm connected to all of those things that you do and that you're talking about. I have had my own journey with childhood adversity. We're very familiar here with the ACE tests. I'm also have, I think, some similar illnesses in my childhood that you have, Lyme, fibromyalgia, probably chronic fatigue, like all the things. I have all the
Yeah.
things too. And so I have seen a naturopath for 25 years or something, even before maybe there was such a thing. So I am super, super excited to talk to you today. And I think this is the first time I have had anyone introduced as an integrated mental health therapist for integrated
Yeah.
medicine, right? We have an integrated doctor on our board, but
Yeah.
mental health is not part of it. So
And yet it makes so much sense.
Doesn't it?
It makes so
hello.
much sense. Yes.
Hello, hello, hello. Yes. Okay. So we're going to let you go from here. Give us a little bit of background on why
Yeah.
you do what you
What I
do.
do.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
tell us how you got here.
And there are a number of us. I just want to speak to that because so many people come to me and they're like, I didn't even know this was a thing that existed.
Yes.
And to your point, it's kind of like, of course it exists, right? But it has taken a while for us to kind of start to bubble up to the surface. And I'd like to explain that I stand on the shoulders of some giants with the work that I'm doing. I am, like so many of us, quite the nerd. I'm always like learning things, and I make a gumbo of all the things I learn, and keep finding that people are drawn to that. They're like,
Yes.
I hit my head, and I have anxiety, and I think I've got this weird gut thing going on, and my body is tight, and I just had a terrible childhood, and it's like all these things come together and form what we call mental health illness or mental illness or anxiety or depression, right? Like, who have you met that is just in a silo dealing with some sort of focused attention and mood issue? Like, it's always this mix of different things. And I think it's that I feel like my testimony has been so that there is someone who can bring all these things together and help so many of the people who are struggling in silence. And then, like, is this idea of a warrior parent. So many of my parents come to me and they're like, I don't want my 5, 7, 8, 10-year-old put on amphetamines because they can't sit in a classroom.
Right.
There has got to be some other option. And then they're coming to me panicked because they're like, my child has to pass EOGs. They need to be able to transition to the next classroom, or the teacher is saying that I need to medicate my child because they're correcting them 15 times a day.
Yes.
And is there something that I can do? And if there isn't, what are the long-term consequences of medication?
Yes.
And there are a number of them, right? And so, when it comes to my parents, I show up for their children and then teach them holistically how to work with them. But then a lot of my parents are like, I actually think I have some sort of issues going on.
Isn't that what we're all figuring out right now?
We all?
And then I end up with like 5 people from one family. And that is, but then everyone heals together and it becomes this really beautiful thing. And so,
perfect. Yes, exactly. Oh, I love that.
And so there are a number of us actually.
Wow. Wow. That gives me hope. Yes. I have a whole family full of ADHDers.
It's genetic. So that makes sense.
Yeah. Although we now understand that there's so many things that we can do to help, something as simple as magnesium. the food you
Yes.
eat, right?
Yes.
It doesn't have to be this like, oh, here I go with my ADHD. It's like, okay, well, what have you eaten today? How
Yes.
much fluid have you had? Did you get any sleep? Like all those things can exacerbate the situation, right?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So just because something's genetic doesn't mean it has to express
Yeah.
or has to express as dramatically in the child as it might have in the adult or the grandparent, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely.
Yeah.
There's so many things that you
So
can do.
what do you think about, let's just because you cover all the things, let's just talk about ADHD in general, and why do you think we have such an epidemic of this? Is this because we just figured this out, or has this been going on all along? Is there too much stimulus? Like, what is it exactly? And
Right.
when I was growing up, I'm probably old enough to be your mother, but there was for
Oh my God.
sure, for sure. But there,
Okay.
there was no such thing as ADHD. I never heard of it. Right.
Yeah.
So where did this come from?
Where did
What's
this
your
come
take?
from?
Yeah.
Yeah, like the environment has definitely changed. The incidence of deficiencies that can occur in utero have
Mm,
also increased, right?
mm,
The environment is quite different. So there is a prevailing belief because ADHD is a neurological diagnosis, right? We can
yeah.
see SPECT scans, which is like a blood flow imaging of different areas of the brain not
Yeah.
getting
Like
as much blood flow, right?
yes.
So we can see this now, right? And there the teachers will tell you if you like talk to some of the old school teachers, like I work with everyone with the brain across the age span. Some of my 70-year-olds are like, oh my, it has changed.
Mm.
Being in a classroom is different. The brains of
Oh,
these children are different. So if you just talk
yeah.
to teachers who have been around, they don't need a big fancy set of degrees and trainings to tell you that
Right.
this didn't used to be the case. But what we are finding is the prevalence of divergent brains.
Hmm.
So the early part of brain development and the late part, the Alzheimer's piece, that it just has exploded. Our brains are changing quite rapidly. And so our environments are very different. We have way more chemicals and toxins in the environments, this Wi-Fi experience that we're having. But also, there are children who have grown up on electronics. And so just what
Yeah.
that does to the attention span, it really is changing the way that from a functional neurological perspective, the eye movement patterns and how eyes move are very different.
Yeah.
And then there's this dopamine problem because now we want more dopamine,
Yeah.
and then the diets are very different. Gut health is very different. We've got Roundup impacting gut
Yes.
health, and gluten is very different. The bread that my grandmother and grandfather ate is very different than the bread that the children are eating now. It's just all of it is so different.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So, but it is a brain diagnosis and not so much a psychological diagnosis. And so that's why what you're saying about like, how did you sleep? How much water did you drink? That
Yeah.
is why you have that conversation because the brain, like any other organ, responds to all of that care.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I have Marcy and I back in the day, we used to do live workshops, right, with
Oh,
kids. And
yeah.
we if you listen to what we're doing, we're teaching tools to help kids regulate so many kids of anxiety and depression and even
Yes.
suicidal ideation. And so part of those workshops, my background is exercise physiology, so I would do these pieces on exercise, on food, nutrition, sleep,
Hydration.
sleep habit, all the
Yeah.
things. So there was one conversation when I was talking about nutrition and, what we're eating, why we're eating. And then I talked about how I grew up on a farm where everything was sprayed with Roundup. Every single in the Midwest, everything is sprayed with Roundup, completely covered. My dad would come in like covered in Roundup. And
Oh,
so, but anyway, there was a gentleman there who got up and walked out. He thought I was like some sort of psycho crazy person who's just like out to get the FDA for approving Roundup on our food. And I just
yeah.
like, my entire uh little small town, rural Minnesota, everyone has cancer, and they like, I don't know why is this happening, right?
Right.
So if you start putting the dots together again over time,
Yes.
you can start to see, what is happening as a result of all these things. And
Yeah.
it takes so much time to sort of peel away the layers to understand. But
Yeah.
Marci and I are excited that the mental health, the mental wellness piece is finally showing up, and that there are people like you to do
Yes.
something about it, right? And
Yes.
to
Yeah.
be straight with people.
Yeah, and here's the thing, and I'm so glad you mentioned that. There's an amazing doctor, Dr. Jill Carnahan, who she's in one of my spaces in functional medicine and environmental illness. Grew up on a farm, developed cancer very early, and that's been like, I mean, at 22 or something, and talked
Mm.
about just, being on a farm and where that's supposed to be this healthy experience, and just the chemicals that have been used, or organicides that were used, and just what that did to her health.
Yeah.
And part of my mission as someone who struggled with my emotional psychological issues growing up, and then who got blessed to be exposed to natural medicine at like 18 to 24, and the throes of trying to still navigate through that, it burns me up to think about people being pathologized and had receiving all these labels,
Yes.
Mm.
and something is physically wrong with them. That just keeps me up. It just
Yes.
scares me,
Yes.
and these children will come to me. I say this children, but teenagers will come to me at 18 to 20 years old, right? And they were put on medications at like 12 to 13 innocently. Parents just doing the best they can, right?
There was nothing else, right?
Right.
What were the options?
Right,
Right?
right.
Nobody knew. That's
No
all
one
there
even
was.
thinks it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so this, I'm like on all these podcasts and summits trying to talk about this option out there for parents. And so what ends up happening is you have these dopamine deficiencies. You're put on a amphetamine, Adderall, Ritalin, whatever it is, the Vyvanse, a Concerta, whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
then the poor child is anxious, and then they can't sleep. And then you give it a few years, and we might have some sort of psychosis. And all of this was because there were imbalances, there were gut health issues. If you just ran pediatric blood work, you would see that a number of these children are insulin resistant, have blood sugar problems, are anemic. There's all these things where like a child's brain has so much neuroplasticity and such an ability to grow and heal and do all these
Mm-hmm.
things.
Yeah.
These children are just amazing. I love having kids in my practice. You give them like three things and they just take it, and their little brains are just amazing, right?
Yeah.
And parents are robbed of this opportunity to just learn to care for their child's brain. And then this child then receives a diagnosis, and they do things with labels that aren't healthy,
Yes.
and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So then, as someone who struggled and didn't understand my struggle, I do this because one, it's a blast to work with kids and families because it's
Yeah.
super
Yeah.
rewarding. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Like the changes are insane. You get a
Yeah.
45-year-old brain, it's going to change. It's just really slow, and we are neuro rigid a lot of ways.
Yeah.
As adults, we think we know things, and kids are just like so flexible.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's
Mm.
part of the mission, is just like, no, you're deficient in something,
Yeah.
and it's not a deficiency. There's not something wrong with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I just think all of that, sharing just the change in the environment, is so important in helping people to connect with that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I first going to my physician for the first, I don't know, week or so, and we were doing all the testing, the heavy metals and the everything,
Everything.
that it's in my water, and it's in my food, and it's in my dry cleaning, and it's everywhere. And
Everywhere.
I just remember feeling so overwhelmed. Like like if I could try to live in a bubble, I guess, right?
Yeah.
I mean there are plastics in 99% of everything on planet Earth right now. And the
Mm-hmm.
government is finally doing something about it. It's 20
Mm-hmm.
some years we have known this, and finally doing something about it, right? So talk a little bit about if parents are listening and going, oh my God, like where would I start?
Yeah.
What are some of the basics that I could start with to
Right.
try to kind of clean up my environment for my family? What would you tell them? What's the starting place? Because
What's the
it's
starting
daunting.
place?
It's
Yeah.
daunting. Yes.
No, and I have to, my husband constantly reminds me, he's like, not everybody sees life the way you do. Like, people get overwhelmed, and I'm like,
Yes.
problem, attack it, we got this. And so I just kind of hold my parents and my families as we do this. And this is a marathon, right? So
Yes.
to just
Right.
take your time. And so the Doc Brown-Bush method is that 3-leg stool of brain, body, mind. Okay. So I am constantly trying, because, and I teasingly say that adults are neuro rigid. I don't mean that. We all have neuroplasticity.
We would agree. But most adults get
We're more rigid than we used to be.
yeah,
And
they can get pretty stuck in some shit.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
right?
once we know it,
It's
hopefully we can do better. So
yes, right. And seeing children transform also opens up the mind of a parent a lot of times too. It's a beautiful thing.
we
So
have so much to learn.
yeah. And so in that method, what I tell people is the way that, think about when you first have a child, right? We're not just doing one thing. So you're feeding your child, you're engaging your child in play, you're working on the primitive reflexes, you're trying to get them to roll over and then crawl and do all, because you're developing the brain. Okay. And you're nourishing the brain as you're developing the brain, and you're saying loving, just amazing little things, and just making the faces. You are developing that brain holistically. The rules don't change. So I know my parents get overwhelmed. At the same time, I'm like, ooh, but my method works, and it works well because it's holistic. So we're going to do a little bit of something from each area of the 3-leg stool of brain, body, mind. Okay. So that's one piece. So if you're talking about environmental toxins, I'm going to look at that as something that impacts the neurological, the brain, and the body, the physiological, right? I start to talk to parents about something as simple as water and air. Water and air. Something they can start doing is just opening up the windows. They have a house full of people who have allergies, and I regroup on that one just a little bit, because we get a lot of allergies in the space, right? But opening the windows, not having plugins going, watching the candles, watching the air fresheners, watching the air in the home. Okay. So clean air, right? Now, could that become a whole spiral? Yes, it can become overwhelming, but broad strokes, don't get overwhelmed. Like broad strokes, because we need a 1% shift. That's what I tell my parents. 1%. If you were a boat or a plane, and I said I need a 1% shift, you'd end up in some totally different place over time. So just, you're a boat or a plane. So just 1% shift, and you could change your child's whole life. So just don't use the plugins, open up the windows, and do not use bottled water. Like, most of the time, I'm not legalistic. My parents got to survive, but like bottled water, get a good water filter going in the house. And then my parents come back, and they've got these whole house water filters. And I was like, I didn't say that. If you want to do that, sure.
Because those are about $3 or $4 grand a piece.
I had a family in Canada spend like 20 grand. And it's like, I know I never said spend $20,000. It's just like, but sure. But clean water, right? Clean water, clean air will change your child's life, right? So just that is one way to deal with the chemical burden. And then kids need to exercise, and they need to sweat, That's one part of their detox pathway. Lymphatics, because they're jostling their bodies around, right? They're sweating through their skin, and they're breathing heavy. Oh my gosh, I've got 3 of the 5. Give them some water. Now they're peeing a lot. I've got 4 of the 5, right? You're detoxing your kid, doing something that they want to do anyway, right? Gold star for you, right? So that's one way to deal with the chemical burden. And if you really want to, in the brain, and if you really want to just go out there and smile at them and encourage them a whole lot, we've done my 3-leg stool. brain, body, mind. They want their parent out there They want them to throw the ball around. They want them to run around. They want them to
Yes.
engage with them, want some attention. So
Yeah.
you've already started to shift the process.
Wow. It sounds so easy, huh, Marci?
Well,
I
I love
know.
that 1%. I mean, that really is, anyone can do 1%. Not everyone can do 50% or even 75. And we know that there's a lot of inequality in the world where some people just getting things like clean air and clean water that maybe a lot of us will take for granted is really a thing. But 1%, whatever you can do from where you are, taking that first step, I think
Yeah.
that's so important. And it holds true for anything, any change you want to make. Start with that first step. Yeah.
Yes. And I encourage my parents to start with that. And a lot of the things that I ask them to do, if we're working on therapy, I do something called emotional focus family therapy through Adele LaFrance. And that 1% is something that they've really researched. It's not about perfection. And it's not about parents feeling awful. They're just doing the best they can from the three
Yes.
generations of what they've learned, So
Yes.
it's really just a little different.
Yes.
Yeah.
And my parents feel so empowered by that, and I mean it. And then they try to do way more than that, of course, because now they're free to try to do more. But I really meant 1% when I said it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I want to talk, you touched on this a little bit, but a big thing that we talk about is generational trauma. And that's actually a big piece of why Marci and I do what we do. We feel like we're here to break the cycle, right? So
Absolutely.
we also understand a lot about the brain rewire and neuroplasticity. So I want you to talk that's kind of a whole segment, but to speak about the generational trauma, because you're seeing so many families, and then the hopeful piece, right, which is the neuroplasticity. And just because these things happen doesn't mean you have to stay there the rest of your life, right? Your brain can change and do all kinds of things. So talk
Absolutely.
specifically about that. Maybe some examples of some of the changes you've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we know more now. We understand, right? So and we're a lot of parents are interrupting those patterns. And I think a lot of the young people, thanks to TikTok and Instagram, are speaking to their parents about these different things. And from a generational trauma perspective, trauma is there's two pieces. I spoke to I'm trained to tell my moms, especially, you're only doing what the last three generations of moms in your family have been doing.
Right.
And that's a lot of unlearning. So I'm going to have you have grace with yourself, and we don't mom bash, we don't do that. It doesn't help anything. Right. So they're always feeling very safe with me. So part of that is just understanding that our elders and generations before us, they didn't know better. We are such a blessed generation, just what we have access to regulate our nervous systems. What a privilege to rewire our brains. You know what I mean? My grandmother's 84 and she can be so emotionally dysregulated at times. And I'm like, this woman, what she went through, and, it is okay. And the most loving thing I can do for her is to show up regulated. To show up. That's how we interrupt it, and to validate. So I teach my parents one thing that I teach them that can also interrupt this pattern. One is we acknowledge the privilege that we have. And then there's a process that is make the bridge, right? So I teach them 3 validations of whatever is going on. So if I'm working with a client patient, if I'm working with my grandmother, I validate in 3 different ways what is going on for her. Wow, you're really upset. Oh, you're so frustrated about this. This is burning you up. You're not okay. And I want you to know I'm here with you and I love you. And we're going to talk through this. And then from a problem solving perspective, you can take just a couple of deep breaths with me. Let's try to kind of just, recalibrate the breathing. And then let's talk through what we can do if that's okay. And so you validate 3 times. We do what I call a compassion bridge. So you get the person's brain across the bridge because we're trying to knit the back brain to the front brain, right? And
Yes.
then you go into problem solving, because we all want to go into problem solving first, which is a generational trauma because emotions don't matter, right?
Yes.
Like it's like fix your behavior and your thoughts. And so that's that 1% change of like, ooh, like their emotions didn't matter. It wasn't safe
No.
to have a bunch of feelings, right?
No.
Doesn't
No.
make them bad people. They got like, thank God they didn't have those feelings or I wouldn't exist. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so it's just that grace with our elders and understanding that the context is very different. And
Yes.
then we can teach and love and support the people who are still alive that came before us. But then we can also do something different with our children, and it's validate. Now, a validate doesn't mean I understand, because sometimes people do and say things I don't understand.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
understand that that's their experience. That's what they're going through. Like right now, they're really angry. Right now, they're feeling really hurt. Right now, they're totally dysregulated and they don't know what to do. And that's real, whether or not I agree with it or understand it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Yes.
validation. Yeah. And then
Yes.
compassion, like, I'm here. I got you. We're together. I'm not afraid of this. I can hold this space with you. Right. Because
Yes.
I have the privilege of knowing how to regulate. Right. And
Yeah.
then now I can problem solve. I can use this big brain of mine that I always want to share with everybody. And all my parents want to, this isn't logical for her to act like this. Mama, I think she knows that this isn't
Yeah.
logical. You've been telling her the last 18 years and she's still dysregulated. So let's just validate her. Let her know you love her and then share all your insights with her. And
Yeah.
that's how we don't continue the trauma of
Mm-hmm.
like not acknowledging those emotions and then getting them stuck in our bodies, and then
Yes.
us all continuing to react, because trauma is not about what happened. It's about what's continuing to happen. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and
You
Wow.
that's
just
it.
nailed it. Just
Yeah,
nailed it. I have never
yeah.
heard anyone say it quite
Yeah.
like that, but man,
Just
a-
Mm-hmm.
amen.
the
Yeah.
whole thing you just went through was just brilliant on so many levels.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you. Lots
Yeah.
of shoulders I stand on.
I
Yeah.
love that you, when asked for an example, you started with your grandmother. And,
Mhm.
we often are thinking about the kids, but that just, it really connected for me. First of all, saying, knowing how privileged we are, that we do have this, we have all this information. So first of all, let's say, yes, thank goodness for what we have. And then
Yeah.
understand that they didn't have that, our
Yeah.
elders, our parents, our grandparents. But that whole piece about validating and kind of being there in compassion with them, I mean, I feel that I've skipped over that with, but being honest here, with my dad so many times. And I go to judgment. I go to all these places that are not helpful.
Mhm.
And when I can take that moment and for understanding, for validation, for compassion, for like you said, that he never had the place to have his emotions, to process them. And man, that's tough for him to be at this stage in his life, in his 80s, and the world is doing all the things the world's doing. And so, God, that's just so powerful. I mean, it's powerful with everyone, obviously, with the kids
Yeah.
and with
Yeah.
ourselves and with everyone else. But I just love that
Yeah.
you chose a senior, someone who's coming from this
Yeah.
different. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's,
I'm so
I think
glad.
I think sometimes we think, well, it's like Marcy and I are so hopeful about this generation of kids, right? We're just like,
Yeah.
Mhm.
okay, we're gonna keep them from all that nonsense that has happened in our generation, and we're holding the space, and we got you guys, like nobody's
Yeah.
gonna touch you. Like we're
Yes.
very protective about our kids, but when
Yeah.
it comes to the older generation, we're kind of like, well, like
Yeah.
do they really want to listen? Do they really want some support? Do they really want to help? Some maybe yes, some maybe no, but the way you've done it is really beautiful, right? That
Yeah.
gives me
Yeah.
hope. Wow.
Yeah. I'm so glad. And I think it is, I know exactly what you're feeling. And it is an absolutely beautiful, appropriate, brain-based approach to just working with other human beings, right?
Yes.
And a lot of us come to this work with these high ACE scores because we've got stuff in our families and we're trying to heal. And what
Yes.
the reason I referenced my grandmother, it was Mother's Day, and I had a 90-minute
Oh,
conversation with my mom and then my
yeah.
grandmother, and it wasn't problematic. And it's because I do this work and I don't try to
Yes.
change them. I show up changed.
Yes.
And then they're like, man, because you won't engage with me in this dysfunctional way, like, look at all of our healing. My mom was just like, look at the love fest we're having. And I'm just,
Yes, yes,
and
yes,
she,
yes, yes, yes,
yeah, and
yes.
she's changed. She's completely different. And I
Yeah.
didn't try to fix her. I just had
Yes.
really
Ugh,
healthy boundaries and I had a lot of grace. I'm like,
yes.
I don't blame you. You went through a lot. I know what my grandmother went through. And at the same time, I validate that. We're going to do the problem solving, but I do love you and I
Yeah.
do see you, right?
Yeah.
And then here's what I need you to stop doing to me, or I'm just going to respond this way, because it stops with me.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, it stops with me. I won't with this. I can't pass this dysfunction on. And they love
Yeah.
the heck out of me for it. They
Yeah.
don't resent me, you know?
Wow.
I
You give
know.
She gives me so much hope. Lord
Yes.
have mercy. Oh my
So
God. Like,
powerful. That's so powerful.
So glad. I'm so glad.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh
Oh
my God.
my
Are we
goodness.
running out of time, Marci? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, we are.
that
But
can't
honestly, I
be,
don't know how
that
you
can't be.
top that. Like, that's such a strong thing to obviously we have to have Dr. Tiffany back to talk about more stuff because we didn't get to it all. But that is such a strong note to end on for people
I'm
to
so
take
glad.
home and just practice that. It
Yeah.
it will shift, it will change things.
Yes, it
Yes.
will. And just that 1%. We don't have high
Yes.
expectations and it can make a huge difference. Yeah.
I think that's my mantra for the rest of the year. Just 1%.
Just 1%.
1%.
1%. What do you
And
think,
this time
Marci?
it doesn't apply to the top 1%ers. It applies
No,
to
Right.
no,
what are
no,
we
no, 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 no.
doing?
No, no,
Yes.
no. We're
Rebranding
shifting.
1%.
Yes, we're
Yes.
shifting just
I love it.
1%. Yeah.
I do
Wow.
too.
Ugh,
Yeah.
So how does everybody find you, Dr.
yes.
Tiffany?
Yeah. Yeah. I am at, you can find me on Instagram at Doc Brown Bush.
Okay.
So you can go there. We're always posting, we're always active. And then I have a website, docbrownbush.com. And there's even a training on that homepage that takes you through my method, the Doc Brown Bush method. For like half an hour, you can learn all kinds of things. And I go
Oh my
deeper
gosh.
into like the amino acids and the fish oils and how do you help rewire the brain from a psychological perspective. So there's a whole little training for the things we didn't get to
Wow.
today.
Oh my
Yeah.
God, I love that.
Yeah.
I'm
Wow.
I'm
Yeah.
going to go do that. We are going to
Yay.
share those links on our page here. So go and check that out and yeah, change your life. Change
Very good.
change your life 1% and then see where that trajectory takes you because it will
Yes.
be,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. Thank you so
Well,
much, Dr. Tiffany.
yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
You're awesome.
Happy to share. Thank you.
And now for your core mental health break. This is your opportunity to take a moment to support your mental wellness, your peace of mind, your ease and grace. Our Core Tools platform consists of a number of proven tools and techniques that are designed to reduce stress, anxiety, and overwhelm in spite of what's going on in your world. We suggest you schedule a mental health break every day. It doesn't have to be elaborate or time-consuming. You can set your alarm and remind yourself to take a deep breath. You deserve it, and it matters. Today we're going to try a little taste of bilateral tapping. So begin by pressing your arms over your chest so that each hand is on the opposite shoulder. And then just tap one side and then the other. Tap on the right, tap on the left. Easily, gently, going back and forth. Breathe deeply. If you like, you can allow your eyes to close and just stay in this tapping rhythm for as long as feels good to you. This will help to calm your nervous system and bring you to a place of center, and you can use it any time that you're feeling a little anxious or unsure about something. For a more in-depth version of bilateral tapping, you can check out our Cour Tools platform or app. Thank you for pausing for yourself today. Your mental health is important, and you deserve peace, calm, and ease in your life every day. So please choose to receive it. It is always available right at your center, your heart, your core. Stay well, friends.
Thanks for listening to the Warrior Parent Podcast, which is a production of our nonprofit, Cour Experience, who also creates and distributes Cour tools. You can find us at courexperience.org. Make sure you join us next week for another informative conversation to help you and your family show up mindfully, purposefully, and joyfully with each other and in your community.
Our Cour Tools platform consists of a number of proven tools and techniques that are designed to reduce stress, anxiety, and overwhelm in spite of what's going on in your world. We want to thank Samuel Hale, LLC, for sponsoring this podcast. Technical and marketing support comes from Inspire Your Brand. Our podcast editor is Justin Beeden. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of the hosts, the producers, or the financial supporters. I'm Debbie DiManno.
And I'm Marci Mitchell. Thanks for listening. If you resonate with the idea of creating a community to help support kids and families, won't you join us by following the podcast and sharing this episode? You can even write a review. It truly does take a village, and we appreciate you.